There is about to be a revolution of membership, at least, between Reform UK and the Conservative Party in about, I don't know, half an hour, a day, a week or so. There will be more registered members of the Reform Party than the Conservatives, Anna.
You know what? This doesn't surprise me whatsoever. I think for many people, they were so fed up with the way the Conservative Party performed, especially like the last government, which I think is why a lot of people voted for Labour. But then I think they've been abysmally disappointed with what's actually been delivered by them. That, you know, made promises, they've broken them, and people are fed up. And I think for, you know, Reform, they see the Reform in the party and Nigel Farage as potentially paving a new way. I have so much respect as well for Rupert Lowe. Everything that he's posting, that he's talking about right now is absolutely spot on and really resonates with people, which I don't think Labour is quite achieving. So I think for many people who were Conservative supporters, they're seeing Reform as potentially being that, you know, paving the way and actually standing for Conservative values.
And Nigel Farage has said something which I've been thinking for a while, which is that there was a post-First World War revolution in the election box, because it was always the Tories and the Whigs, the Tories and the Liberals, which are kind of the modern-day Republicans and Democrats in the USA, give or take a few left-wing leanings on the Democratic side. When Labour got their first election victory shortly after the First World War. And what he's saying is it's the right of British politics that is undergoing a revolution, that maybe, just maybe, the Conservatives, who have largely been the government of the last 150 years, give or take a few elections, are about to lose their footing to this new version of conservatism that you're mentioning, the Reform Party. Could it be possible that Nigel Farage goes from 5 MPs to 300? I mean, is that possible in one election?
You know what? I think it could very much be possible. I think for many people, like the supporters, they have felt for so long that the Conservative Party is not actually standing for Conservative values. And if anything, some of the things that the MPs have been coming out with, some of the policies they've been standing for, have, and for many people, just sort of seem quite left-wing. And if you're a member of the Conservative Party, you're going to hope that the Conservatives actually stand for Conservative values, which I think they felt massively let down. And I think for many people who would have been Conservative supporters, they see Reform as paving that new way forward. They're speaking about issues that people truly care about, that Labour are avoiding. So I think many people are really fed up with the direction that we're seeing this country going, and Reform could be the answer to actually pushing back against that.
Now, of course, it's the red wall that is going to be the place where the election battle will take place, just as it did when Boris Johnson was elected in 2019 and just when it was when Keir Starmer was elected this year in July. And as it turned out, because what Boris did or didn't do, and because of the sort of falling like dominoes Conservative prime ministers that happened since with Liz Truss and with Rishi Sunak, effectively the disaffected Labour voters of 2019 did return, if reluctantly, to Keir Starmer, because this was a loveless landslide, wasn't it, as they're calling it. So again, the red wall will be the place where election victories will be won or lost. Will they really fall to Reform, who came second in so many constituencies in 2024?
I believe as well, if I'm correct, that when you were considering the votes that were made in the general election, the actual total number of votes for the Conservatives and Reform respectively were actually higher than the number of votes that Labour got, if we're talking about in terms of the share of votes and MPs that were elected. And which I think, of course, that just says it all for a start. And I think as long as we have candidates candidates in those constituencies that really care, really understand what the constituents want to see change. For example, Rupert Lowe, again, fantastic example. We're seeing people from all sides of the political spectrum supporting him and really resonating with what he has to say. I think as long as we've got candidates that are bold enough like him to really take an interest in what the constituents want and speak up on things that other people aren't doing right now, I do truly believe that we could see this happening.
Really? I mean, because Reform came second to Labour in many constituencies, and Nigel Farage has said that the battleground is to get Labour voters as much as Conservatives. But as you say, if you add up the Tory and Reform votes together, they thrashed Labour in the popular vote, and of course they would have won the seats, which begs the question. The full name of the Conservative Party is the Conservative and Unionist Party. There was some kind of merger going on in time in memoriam. Will we see a Conservative and Reform Party? How will they divvy up the leadership if that happens? Or is Farage going for the jugular and trying to kick the Tories out? That's what he seems to be saying now. But I guess as we move nearer to the election in 4.5 years' time, he might lighten up on that.
You know what? I think so much can change even in a year, let alone 4.5 years. I think a big hope for them, if they really want to win, if they could form some kind of union together, they would have an even bigger chance. But then I also sort of think, are the Conservative Party done for? Because I think as well, they needed to lose the election. I think many disappointed Conservative voters either swung towards Reform or even some did a protest vote towards Labour because they were so fed up. And I think we could see, if they were to actually, with the Conservatives, they needed that time in the backbenches to actually redefine themselves as a party and actually stand for Conservative values. If there is a way that they could work together and be one really strong government, that would be quite promising. But is it too late? I think that's the question that we also need to consider.
I tell you what, I think that Reform's 4.1 million votes will be improved on in the next general election. I know that's a very, very long way out, but I think it's inevitable the way things are going. And who knows who the Tory leader might be in 4 years' time. And the reason why I think that Reform need to really seriously think about a merger or some kind of relationship with the Conservatives in the election is because they came second in only 98 seats during the election, which means that the Conservatives still have, even though they were really thoroughly beaten, they still have some electoral power, and they're even ahead in the polls. Effectively, the right's vote is split, and that's why Labour won the election. And it does look like, even though people are very disaffected by what they've seen of this Labour government so far, that the Conservatives and Reforms do need to club together at some point.
No, I completely agree. And I think what the Conservatives need to do, they need to redefine themselves as a party. They need to assess the reasons why they lost. I think a big part of the reason why they lost was during the COVID lockdowns, the way that people were lied to, manipulated, and they felt utterly betrayed by the government. And I think that's why a lot of people lost trust in them. And how could you vote for a party leadership that's meant to represent you when you've lost complete faith in the government? So I think they need to really look at themselves and reassess who they actually are as a party. And then if there is a way that they could come together and be really strong, that would be fantastic. I do wonder, though, if the Conservative Party might be too concerned with optics to really stand for the issues that people care about. That's a question I'd also have as well. But if they could come to some kind of understanding, that would be great. And I think that would be very strong, but we'll just have to see.
I want to talk about Kemi Badenoch here, because everyone was so interested when she got elected. She is like no other Tory leader that there's ever been. She doesn't look like anything or anybody that's been before. And she spoke like it was. And I remember leading up to the Tory election for the leadership, she gave Angela Rayner a right roasting on housing. And we thought, this woman, she speaks the truth. There were some questions about whether she was as right-wing in appeal as Robert Jenrick, but she hasn't made that electoral start, that start that we were hoping for, because actually her biggest rival is not the Prime Minister. it's Farage, isn't it? And she hasn't cut through. Why is that, Anna?
Well, for a start, I think she needs to stop being so concerned about debating over sandwiches. That would be a good start. And I think I think as well, I don't think she's made any particularly strong stances since being put into that position. I personally haven't seen anything that's been majorly remarkable or stand out as of yet. I hope maybe that might change. I don't know. But I would say, I mean, out of the two between herself and Robert Jenrick did seem more like the more right-wing conservative leader, whereas she probably more swung towards centrist, maybe not the same sort of stance that Robert Jenrick necessarily had. But I would also wager that maybe it was Kemi Badenoch more of a safer bet for the party. It's something that I would consider. But I think with these MPs and leaders, they just need to take a stand. And actually, I think what they really need to do is, again, I'm going to bang on about Rupert Lowe, because I just think he's so fantastic. Take example by him and really just be bold, really care about what the constituents' issues are, and take those stances, really do your research. I think the sort of work he's doing at the moment, the research, the essays that he's publishing are so fascinating and resonate with so many. And I think if other MPs followed by example, we would see some huge differences.